estetika, aktivisme, dan gerakan politik itu sendiri. Untuk hari pertama kita akan menghadirkan 3 pembicara. Bersama saya di ruangan ini sudah ada Ade Darmawan, dan yang bergabung secara online adalah Hur Al-Kasimi dari Sarjah Biennale dan Melati Suryodarmo. Terima kasih sekali atas kehadiran 3 pembicara kali ini. Pada diskusi hari pertama kita akan berbicara secara khusus dalam topik Art, Politics, and Collective Movements. Hari ini kita akan melihat bagaimana relasi antara peristiwa seni. Jadi ketiga pembicara yang kita hadirkan di sini memiliki pengalaman dan juga praktik yang berkaitan dengan pengelolaan peristiwa seni seperti biennale, triennale, atau documenta, dan melihat bagaimana peristiwa-peristiwa tersebut dapat berkelindan, bersilangan, dan berhubungan dengan dunia politik secara langsung. Jadi itu bisa menjadi jalan politik, tetapi pada saat yang sama kita ingin melihat bagaimana juga peristiwa-peristiwa ini merespon konteks-konteks sosial politik yang lebih luas. Kita akan memulai dari Ade Darmawan. Sebelum Ade memulai percakapan kami, jadi kita akan lebih bersifat percakapan ya untuk sesi ini. Saya ingin membacakan sedikit biografi Ade Darmawan, walaupun untuk pengumuman Zoom ini direcord, jadi untuk teman-teman yang nanti bertanya atau melontarkan respon melalui chat, semuanya akan terekam untuk kepentingan publikasi dan dokumentasi Biennale Jogja. Juga teman-teman yang tidak bergabung di Zoom,
Recording in progress.
Di sini juga ada live stream melalui YouTube Biennale Jogja. Jadi saya lanjutkan, saya akan membacakan biografi pendek dari Ade Darmawan karena kita semua tahu track recordnya sangat panjang dalam dunia seni, tetapi kita belakangan mengenalnya sebagai pencetus gitu ya, bersama teman-teman di Ruang Rupa, pencetus ide lumbung yang dipresentasikan dalam documenta 15 yang baru saja selesai bulan September 2022 yang lalu. Tapi Ade sendiri tinggal dan bekerja di Jakarta sebagai seniman, kurator, dan pendiri dan direktur Ruang Rupa. Ade sebenarnya berbasis juga di Jogja ketika kuliah di Institut Seni Indonesia. Lulus nggak deh? Nggak lulus. Lalu kemudian melanjutkan pendidikannya di program residensi di Raj Academy Studio selama 2 tahun. Itu kira-kira akhir tahun 80 atau 90? Tahun 98 ya. Setelah itu Ade berpraktik sebagai seniman, bekerja dengan instalasi, video, objek, dan media-media lain. Oke. Untuk memulai percakapan kita, selamat siang Ade, terima kasih sekali sudah main ke kantor Biennale Jogja.
Iya, kebetulan di sini. Makasih Alia undangannya. Terima kasih juga. Halo Hur, Mbak Mel juga udah lama nggak ketemu. Nggak ding, baru ketemu ding kemarin di Solo. Di Magelang.
Oh ya. Di Indonesia Bertutur, nanti akan dipresentasikan oleh Mbak Melati. Kita akan mulai percakapan kita dengan mungkin refleksi nih ya, kalau kita berbicara tentang pengalaman yang baru saja terjadi, bagaimana Ade dan teman-teman di Ruang Rupa kemudian menjadi artistik direktur dari documenta, tetapi kemudian yang kita dengar sebagai pelaku seni atau komunitas seni di luar, kadang-kadang percakapannya tidak lagi tentang bagaimana itu pameran itu berlangsung atau wacana estetika yang berkembang ya, tetapi banyak sekali diskusi-diskusi tentang documenta kali ini yang justru berbicara tentang seni dan politik gitu. karena kemudian pamerannya sendiri mendapatkan gejolak atau kontestasi politik ya dari terutama masyarakat di Eropa sendiri gitu. Nah, kalau Ade merefleksikan itu sebenarnya bagaimana sih melihat documenta itu dalam konstelasi politik ketika kejadian itu berlangsung?
Ya, terima kasih Al. Waktu itu sebenarnya ketika kita mulai kita lebih fokus ke perjalanan kita gitu ya, karena waktu itu sebenarnya 2017 itu kita baru pindah kan, kita baru pindah dan juga mencoba model baru gitu ya, yang lebih mekanistik dari lumbung gitu ya, karena lumbung sebagai praktik itu memang sudah kita lakukan gitu sekian lama gitu, tapi secara mekanistik itu kita mulai sekitar 2013 dan terus 2015 kita ubah itu dengan lebih formal lagi sebenarnya gitu ya, dengan collective of collective good school itu, dengan platform edukasi berbasis kolektif itu gitu. Yang kita lihat itu sebenarnya memang awalnya adalah sebuah model yang memang akan menantang banyak hal, tidak cuma politik ya, tapi juga ekonomi, dan pasti akan menggeser atau menantang yang lainnya gitu. Karena sebenarnya lumbung sendiri kita lihat sebagai sebuah model atau sikap atau konsep yang berbasis prinsipal dan value gitu, yang lebih mengacu pada sebenarnya Indian lebih kayak mempertanyakan atau mencoba atau berspekulasi tentang bagaimana kita hidup bersama gitu. Diawali dari bagaimana kita melihat sumber daya, lalu juga bagaimana kita bisa berbagi secara kolektif sumber daya itu. Begitu kita ajukan, kita tahu sebenarnya itu akan terjadi benturan gitu, benturan secara model gitu, karena ini memang operating system yang berbeda gitu, ini OS yang berbeda, dan kita tahu juga documenta juga dengan segala macam tradisi dan sejarahnya gitu ya, yang kita yang kita susur gitu pelan-pelan sebenarnya gitu, dan banyak banget yang kita harus ubah dan kita harus tantang, ada yang berhasil ada yang enggak gitu ya, secara ekonomi dan secara politik tentu aja, karena ini benar-benar membuat banyak struktur yang berbasis pada hierarki dan juga berbasis pada otoritas itu jadi dipertanyakan dan bahkan harus berubah gitu, dan itulah yang sebenarnya terjadi akhirnya gitu ya.
Jadi sejak awal lumbung memang punya kesadaran politik ya untuk melakukan perubahan.
Iya, dan sebenarnya kita tambahin sebagai model ekonomi ya, karena kita ngelihat banyak sekali gerakan politik itu tidak cukup punya waktu dan energi gitu atau tenaga gitu untuk juga menawarkan sebuah model ekonomi gitu, dan kalau menurut kami itu harus bersamaan gitu, karena hampir tidak mungkin gitu ada satu model cara menyikapi sebuah praktik lalu itu tidak bersamaan dengan model ekonominya gitu, karena kalau dia masih tersangkut dengan model ekonomi lama gitu, maka yang ini gerakan politik ini atau gerakan spekulasi politik ini akan menjadi simbol atau menjadi kampanye atau menjadi sebuah slogan saja gitu. Nah ini sebenarnya yang lagi kita kerjain, dan itu harus bersamaan gitu, karena memang lumbung juga kan bukan soal itu, tapi juga dia soal ekonomi juga, resources gitu, yang sangat basic banget di nggak cuma di dunia seni gitu ya, di bidang-bidang yang lain juga menjadi sangat fokus yang perlu kita pertanyakan gitu.
Ya, artinya ketika kemudian terjadi gejolak, walaupun itu gejolaknya kemudian menggunakan konteks politik di Eropa ya, sebagai yang memang secara sejarah sangat berakar, tetapi kemudian dihubungkan dengan praktik-praktik yang dimunculkan oleh para kolektif di Lumbung gitu. Nah, ketika terjadi gejolak, kemudian documenta 15 mendapatkan perhatian yang jauh lebih besar dari masyarakat luas gitu, dan dibicarakan tidak hanya sebagai konteks wacana seni. Ini yang menurut saya juga menarik ya, karena sebelumnya documenta selalu dilihat lebih sebagai ruang atau wahana dari diskusi-diskusi untuk melihat sebenarnya apa sih peran seni dalam masyarakat secara umum. Nah, tetapi dengan Lumbung dia justru melampaui itu gitu. Dan ada percakapan-percakapan yang berkelindan antara seni, sejarah, seni dan politik dan banyak hal yang lain termasuk ekonomi tadi. Apakah dengan keributan atau dengan konflik-konflik yang terjadi sebenarnya tujuan ruang rupa untuk menjadikan Lumbung sebagai wahana politik itu berhasil atau enggak nih? Kalau Ade melihat itu sendiri, artinya memang ada percakapan gitu kan untuk perubahan itu sendiri. Gitu.
Waktu di awal banget sebenarnya yang kita inginkan itu sebenarnya membuka yang pertama selain mengubah relasi gitu ya, relasi kuasa di antar produsen dan juga seniman sama seniman, lalu juga gimana membuat itu menjadi sebuah percakapan yang lebih equal dan horizontal gitu, dan lebih menjadi sebuah siklus yang memutar gitu dibanding ekstraktif dan eksploitatif gitu yang kebanyakan event atau organisasi seni melakukan sekarang ini gitu. Itu yang membuat kita lalu mengubah riset dan juga mengubah pola-pola relasi kuasa di struktur, dan juga mengubah relasi model ekonomi dokumentanya sendiri gitu. Ada yang kita berhasil, ada yang enggak sebenarnya. Banyak detailnya. Cuma ada beberapa yang kalau menurut aku jadi penting banget gitu, karena yang pertama itu lalu kita juga membagi atau bercakap-cakap dengan praktek-praktek yang kurang lebih sama gitu, struggle, perjuangan-perjuangan, model-model, spekulasi-spekulasi yang ada di banyak tempat yang kurang lebih punya pendekatan seperti Lumbung dalam artian mengelola collective resources secara lebih demokratis gitu, secara lebih equal. Dan itulah yang lalu itu bercakap-cakap akhirnya, dan di poin itu sebenarnya kami gembira banget atau senang banget ya, karena di fase itu atau di poin itu kita achieve banyak banget sebenarnya, karena sebenarnya aktivisme itu atau perjuangan-perjuangan itu sebenarnya kan isolated, sama nggak bercakap-cakap gitu. Ya kita bisa ini aja di Indonesia aja misalnya gitu kan, kita kan sebenarnya satu sama lain di regional aja itu sebenarnya tidak bercakap-cakap secara intens dan secara kolaboratif juga ya, yang kita selalu bertemu di tempat lain gitu dan itu pun hanya sedikit lah, hanya elit-elit lah gitu, kayak Melati, Alia. Nah yang ini yang kalau menurut aku ada konstruksi Lumbung yang mendasar gitu, yang lalu terjadi, solidaritas terjadi juga, dan memang itu yang membuat kita juga kepengen ini memang berjalan terus gitu ya. Jadi kalau menurut aku yang menarik dari ini adalah sebenarnya justru ketika documenta 15 selesai gitu. Jadi yang lebih menarik sebenarnya setelah documenta 15, karena Lumbungnya lalu menjadi sebuah model yang benar-benar ditantang atau dilihat, dikritisi dan dipakai secara nyata gitu, sebagai sebuah alat untuk berbagi, belajar bersama, terus juga membuat jejaring yang solidaritas yang sangat menjadi penopang ya, karena seperti kemarin begitu kita menghadapi konflik di sana itu sangat berguna untuk saling saling dukung, dan juga banyak sekali bentuk-bentuk baru dari kesepahaman di antara kita yang sebelumnya hampir tidak bercakap-cakap sebenarnya, dan itu makin terbuka gitu di antara poin-poin di belahan dunia ini. Jadi itu sebenarnya kalau menurut saya sesuatu yang wajar atau sesuatu yang begitu menjadi politis, karena memang kita dengan model itu lalu kita connect-nya dengan yang grassroots, praktek-praktek yang grassroots yang juga sangat spekulatif gitu ya, model ekonomi, model edukasi juga gitu, ada juga banyak juga dari environmental activism gitu. Jadi sesuatu yang selama ini memang direpress gitu, dan itu keluar dengan sendirinya karena dia punya kesamaan solidaritas gitu.
Artinya Ade menggarisbawahi pada bagaimana peristiwa seperti biennale, documenta atau bentuk-bentuk seperti ini bisa menjadi ruang percakapan gitu ya, dan pada akhirnya ketika mereka bertemu lalu punya upaya untuk saling memahami, ada solidaritas yang terus berlanjut gitu. Apakah artinya Ruang Rupa sendiri atau Ade sendiri sebagai seniman, kurator masih percaya pada bentuk-bentuk biennale atau documenta ini sebagai institusi?
Sebagai bentuk presentasi atau sebagai bentuk maksudnya gimana?
Lebih apakah memang karena sekarang kita melihat banyak sekali ya peristiwa seni seperti biennale yang berlangsung di banyak tempat gitu, tapi dengan situasi dunia yang sekarang apakah masih relevan kalau perannya hanya menjadi ruang presentasi? Justru itu sih yang saya kira penting untuk dipertanyakan.
Iya, kalau aku berangkat dari praktiknya sendiri ya, karena dari praktiknya sendiri itu memang juga sangat banyak mengaktifkan sensorical yang enggak tunggal gitu ya, dia selalu beragam gitu. Jadi bagaimana melihat ruang bukan hanya sebagai sebuah bentuk pameran atau showcase gitu, tapi juga dia sebagai senjata, bahkan gitu sebagai sebuah ruang tamu, sebagai sebuah ruang interaksi, benda-benda atau bahkan karya-karya seni yang ditampilkan juga itu punya agensi sendiri, misalnya terhadap sejarah, terhadap local konteks gitu, dan itu kalau menurut aku akan mungkin pertanyaannya relevan gak relevan, jawabannya mungkin seberapa dia menjadi cukup locally anchored ya gitu juga, karena banyak sekali, itu yang pertama. Tapi pada saat yang bersamaan bercakap-cakap ini juga kan soal nggak cuma berbicara tapi juga mendengarkan kan gitu, dan kebanyakan biennale itu inginnya bicara gitu nggak ngedengerin gitu. Jadi gimana institusi punya dua senses itu gitu. Itu sebenarnya yang kemarin kita eksperimen dengan itu, dan bahkan dengan model lumbung itu kita justru bahkan menginstall itu gitu. Bagaimana misalnya documenta mendengarkan konteks-konteks yang lain yang sebelumnya kan documenta sangat sentralistik, kepengennya didengerin gitu. Mungkin pertanyaannya itu ya, pertanyaan gimana sebenarnya. Aku sih masih percaya sama banyak bahasa gitu, bahasa poetik, bahasa visual, artistik itu aku masih percaya. Cuma bagaimana dia digunakan atau bagaimana si lembaga itu punya role gitu terhadap dirinya dan pihak-pihak lain gitu, termasuk secara internal maupun eksternal sebagai sebuah event ya gitu. Kebanyakan kan seperti itu ya, kebanyakan tidak terjadi dialog gitu, bahkan dialog antar senimannya aja sebenarnya tidak terjadi. Gitu, banyak sekali. Aku selalu bilang event-event besar itu sebenarnya event-event paling antisosial sebenarnya gitu. Seniman
sibuk pada produksi.
Iya, sibuk pada produksi. Seniman produksi datang perform atau install, opening and then pulang. Jadi sebenarnya di model itu sebenarnya sangat corrupted ya, dan kita melakukan itu sudah, maksudnya dunia seni itu melakukan model itu sudah lama sekali, dan waktu ke Documenta kemarin itu kita nge-twistnya atau membukanya dengan cukup sederhana sebenarnya gitu. Bagaimana seniman sama seniman bisa berbicara, itu aja sudah jadi sesuatu yang beda banget gitu. Yang akhirnya bahkan juga mempengaruhi bagaimana karya-karya mereka dipresentasikan gitu. Sebenarnya itu sih, gimana lembaga event atau lembaga seni itu lebih punya keterbukaan terhadap model-model seperti itu yang kadang-kadang kalau aku pikir biennale memang jadi agak sulit karena ada unsur waktu kan gitu. Jadi secara so-called kuratorial memang harus terbatas gitu.
Ya. Terima kasih sekali Ade atas sharing dan ceritanya. Saya kira ada banyak sekali poin penting ya yang kita bisa garis bawahi. Yang terakhir saya kira sangat menarik untuk melihat biennale atau peristiwa-peristiwa seni sebagai the act of listening. Bagaimana kita tidak bersifat sentralistik terhadap apa yang ingin dilakukan oleh lembaga tersebut, tetapi memberi platform untuk orang-orang lain, kolektif dan komunitas berbicara gitu. Saya kira ini penting untuk kita jadikan pijakan untuk percakapan kita selanjutnya. Okay, now I twist to English. Sorry, I forgot to mention that this conversation actually bilingual, so you can choose in the interpretation section English or Indonesia. So it will be like you can move around between both languages. The next one, we will hear from Hur Al-Kashimi. Good afternoon. It will be morning there in Sharjah.
Yeah, it's morning.
Yeah. Good morning, Hur. Thank you very much for accepting the invitation to be part of this symposium. Very happy to have you here and talking with our colleagues. And I think from our first conversation with Ade Darmawan, we can also continue to share the experience of Sharjah Biennale in the last, I think you already existed more than 20 years, but then there are many different political changes that in the end changing also the vision and the form of the Biennale itself. So before we hear from Hur Al-Kashimi, I would like to introduce Hur Al-Kashimi is the president and director of Sharjah Art Foundation that established in 2009 as the catalyst and advocating the arts in Sharjah in United Arab Emirates, as well as regionally and internationally. Sharjah Art Foundation organized the Sharjah Biennale and also now expanding to the Sharjah Architecture Triennial, right?
It's a different department. Yeah.
It's started. Different one.
It's okay. I'm working on both, so it's fine.
Okay, yeah. So please, Hur, we have 15 minutes for you to share. Maybe you have some slides, videos, but also we can also continue the conversations from some of the points that I discussed before with Ade, how you see the platform like biennales, triennales, or even documenta in the connection to the political context, the wider political context, and especially you work with the Arab region, that it geopolitically it's expanding, not only thinking about Arab, the Gulf, or the idea of the Islamic identity, but also the post-colonial situation and the global South. So I think we can start with that question. How do you see the positions of Sharjah Biennale or other international events as biennales, as you also work in, and you are also like the chairman for the president of the International Biennial Association. How do you see biennales connected to the idea and the context, the bigger context of political movements, especially in the last decades when we saw lots of political changing in international stage? Please.
Thank you. Thanks, Alia, for the introduction. I'm just turning my interpretation off. Just a quick background. Actually, Sharjah Biennial started in 1993, so we'll be celebrating our 30-year anniversary next year. The 15th edition we postponed by 2 years. So it took us 4 years to do this biennial because I thought it was important to spend time and do it properly and think about the legacy of the biennial. And speaking of documenta, it was documenta 11 that made me come back to Sharjah to really try to figure out why do we have to go to Germany to talk about all these issues that are happening at our doorstep? Which is, it's always that the West would like to claim the narrative, but it is our story and we need to talk.
Ini adalah cerita kita dan kita perlu melakukan apa yang tadi dikatakan percakapan horizontal. Saya tumbuh dengan Sharjah Biennale dan kita punya platform di sini, dan penting untuk saya untuk kembali untuk memikirkan kenapa percakapan ini terjadi di sini. Biennale itu sangat penting dalam situasi ini karena tidak hanya mengenai memiliki ruang bagi dialog ini, tetapi juga memiliki percakapan itu sendiri. Dan jadi apa yang saya temukan yang menarik adalah kita memiliki pameran dan juga program-program lain, dan secara organik kita mulai dengan museum dan proyek kita tumbuh mengikuti kebutuhan seniman. Apakah itu menjawab pertanyaan Anda?
I think you can also try to expand a bit of the conversations to different projects that being held in during the Sharjah Biennale and
selama Biennale Sharjah,
of the connection to the bigger movements, like
koneksinya dengan gerakan yang lebih besar. Jadi bagaimana Anda terkoneksi misal dengan Arab Spring selama Revolusi Arab? Anda tadi menanyakan slide. Saya tidak punya waktu untuk membuat yang baru, tetapi saya punya beberapa gambar untuk memberi gambaran mengenai latar belakang.
This is how the biennial started in 93, the old Expo Center, and then moved to a new Expo Center. But I think through art you could talk about a lot of political situations where it's not easy to talk about in the public sphere. I think there are ways to engage with different generations. So a lot of people who have participated or were part of our workshops are actually coming as adults, telling us that they're working in the arts or performers, or sometimes end up working with us at the foundation, which is quite nice. Also having legacies of artists who have sadly passed away, who've worked very site-specific. That's the beauty of biennials. The projects are site-specific and are open to the general public. It's not about buying a ticket or entering or coming with an agenda to see an artwork, but passers-by are able to be part of this conversation. This is one of the works that a lot of people interacted with in the so-called Arab Spring. it was Imran Qureshi's Blessings Upon the Land of My Love, talking about bombing in a market in Lahore. And the beauty of these flowers and the red paint going into the drainage, so almost like blood. And it was interesting, as we were posting images of this while he was working, a lot of people came to see the work, interacted with it. Later on, this work went to the rooftop of the Met, so it has a completely different connotation, different time, different place. So it's really important that certain things that happen site specifically of a certain moment don't have the same energy when they are transported into another location or time. For us, when you talked about Adea was talking about artists coming together or communities. There are many biennials where we've heard artists complain that they didn't meet each other, there were no social spaces. And I think one thing we try in Sharjah is to really engage with the community and to make room for the artists to meet, including the March meeting with the annual conference that we did. Yeah. Yeah. And so I think that's also a responsibility for us as the foundation. Sometimes curators that come don't really have that in mind or don't really understand or know the community to be able to do that. And I think that's something that with the last documenta, Rangrupa tried to change, where they curatorially enforced this idea of community and engagement within the exhibition. So I thought that was really, really special. A lot of the artworks remain permanent. So Apichat Pong and Ole Shirin's open air cinema is now our cinema. So it's really about creating a space, a safe space for people to come together. And yeah, kind of. And also, of course, another thing that I'm involved in is saving a lot of buildings from demolition and repurposing them. And then hence starting the architecture triennial, which is a different department, but I'm heading both the Sharjah Art Foundation and the architecture triennial. Both will take place in 2013 again. So just a few images. Another building we repurposed from the 70s, the Flying Saucer, to create space for community. And studios, again, space for people to spend time. The last performance by Taro Shinoda, who sadly passed away, and Uriel Barthelemy. And then creating spaces for communities. Here's the urban garden, where we had a Sudanese performance and poetry night. And engaging with the streets, as you could see. Sorry, I'm being very quick here for time and studios there.
But it's very interesting how you use the activation of the space as part of the community engagement. I think it started from the creating the space and then bringing the community and how to create the relationship between the artworks and the community. So how do you see this act of creating the space become political in that sense?
So I think, for example, in the next biennial, I'm spreading out into 5 cities in Sharjah, trying to decenter the biennial as much as possible. The first biennial that had the factory, when I had the factory, the curator, Yuko, in 2013, thought it was too far and didn't want to use it. And the next biennial, Adrian Villaroja, with the biennial curated by Unji, decided they do want to use it. And then the year after that, the biennial after that, we had a new building, which was the Hamriya Studios, and Christine preferred to use that because, again, people always say Kalba is too far. So I was getting really frustrated with the idea of things being too far when there are actually people living there and communities and neighborhoods. So trying to decenter the biennial as much as possible. I've banned the word offsite in our office. There's no such thing as offsite. Everything is as important. And you'll see in this biennial, a lot of artists from different generations on every site. Excuse me. But within within curating and organizing the space, it was important for me to think of spaces for people to spend time and talking to the communities. Sorry. So, you know, walking with people from the neighborhood, explaining to them the works as we're installing, asking them, you know, what they think about certain things, because it's really important to listen to your audience. At the end of the day, a lot, not all biennials, but publicly funded biennials like Sharjah, it is the public's money. And if you lose your public, then you are not, you might as well be somewhere else. You know, you might as well be in Paris or London or whatever, because it's important to think of the generations that are growing with the biennial. And I feel this year has been 20 years since I took over Sharjah Biennial, and I really feel a difference. And I always stress to people, it's not overnight change, but it's a generational change.
Yeah, thank you. I think also Sharjah is one of my favorite biennials. It's almost I'm quite lucky to be able to visit Sharjah for a few times. So for me, the most interesting part about Sharjah, as you mentioned, is how you always try to activate like different spaces. Each year you use the market, you use like the heritage area, you use the shore of the sea, and different kind of space for engagement. I think also you mentioned before that this year you will use some other cities in Sharjah, so not only centralized in the Sharjah city itself. So how do you see this expansion of the space, not only in terms of the space as place, but more the political intention of the use of the space? Like, how do you connect the idea of using different cities as part of decentralization, for example? Maybe you can also reveal us some of the plans for the next Sharjah Biennial.
Sure. I mean, the last biennial I had 3 curators, and I thought then we could spread out and use 3 different sites. So that was good. We were able to use 3 of the cities, and this year, next year, as I mentioned, it'll be 5. It's important to think of the venue we're in, the location, the public, and what the public can relate to. So in the same sites will be the Hamriya studios that we had, which are artist studios in a little fishing town just north of here. But this year we have the extra building, which is an old government building that's just across. So that will be an expansion, but also while we're renovating this government building, we're creating a shared working space, coffee shop, a place for children to play, and we're connecting it more visibly to our art center that's actually there and gives workshops. So it's not so hidden, making this connection more visible. And then in the Kalba factory, the one I briefly showed, it's just had a new renovation. So we'll open again with major works. Nari Ward is coming to install actually today. He's just landed, so he has a huge installation there. The kindergarten is not renovated yet, so it's a half-used space, and it'll also be activated with works that really look at politics and also childhood, you know, trying to relate to this kind of ghost-like space of an abandoned or old kindergarten. The new area that I'm specifically excited about now is Adait. It's a central region. It's a desert oasis farmland where we've taken an old palace. It's an old house called the Palace, and a dead farm, and an old medical clinic. So we're semi-renovating that space, but looking at artworks and artists whose projects really the local community can relate to or could try to engage with. We will have performances on every location, And for the opening week, we'll have full days in different locations so that people can spend time and not feel like they're rushing from location to location. I'm particularly excited about this because it's been, I don't want to have to feel like we're only focusing on a certain community and forgetting others because they're not in the main city and in the periphery. And that's something that I've been trying to work around. We also have art centers where we do workshops in 9 cities in Sharjah at the moment. Yeah.
Maybe the last question will be quite similar to what I asked to Ade Darmawan on how you see the future, or how do you believe that spaces like Sharjah Biennales or events like different events in the world like Biennales could be the space for new imaginations, or how do you see the relevance of Sharjah Biennale in the context of the now of the political situations? I think you also work quite strongly in the region, not only in the Arab countries itself, but also in the North Africa with the project of African Center. So when you mention today is like 20 years after you took over the Sharjah Biennale, how do you see the differences or the changes that created by the Biennale in terms of bringing this solidarity or new movements to a new generation?
Well, yeah, like you mentioned, we founded the Africa Institute a couple of years ago, but it was a conversation that started in 1976 with the opening of Africa Hall, looking at pan-Arab and pan-African relationships. It was that very political moment that we're all looking back to. And it was only 40 years later that we went back to the original conference, we found the report and decided to establish this institute that was recommended in the initial conference from 1976. Actually, I have all the recordings here from the from the original conference that I found. But what's interesting is solidarity, as you mentioned. I was very lucky to be the president of the International Biennial Association that you and I joined at the same time. And I think for me, I really believed in this platform or association of a solidarity project of biennials coming together to support each other. I think there is no certain model or way to do things. It's important not to think that the Western model is the right way or the museum institutional practice is the right way, but find your own in terms of what works for you. Take the knowledge and readapt it in any way you want. So we're trying to, with the IBA, have biennials come together, work together, co-commission, just be there for each other and be collegial rather than competitive. I curated the Lahore Biennial in 2020, which was a very special experience for me as well. So I think solidarity and collaboration are the most important things. And with everything that I mentioned, with interest that has been happening in the region and our parts of the world, it was important for me to set up things like the Architecture Triennial, the Africa Institute, and continue all the extra projects we do at Sharjah Art Foundation, because every year we see more and more people that are engaging with it. Last night was the last night of our art book fair, and it was every edition, the numbers are just bigger, and we have the local artists also involved. We do a comic book, a local comic book. The all local comic artists come together and they do a book launch. So it's really important to think local and global, or local as everyone seems to say. But I think it's important to not only think of the international, but also the local. Yeah.
Thank you, Hur. We will continue the conversation in the Q&A sections. Thank you very much for your sharing. And the next speaker will be Melati Suryodarmo. Good afternoon, Mbak Melati. So you are online from Solo, ya? Solo is
Yes.
a city like 2
Alia.
hours from Jogja. Thank you for joining us, Mbak Melati. I know you've been very busy preparing different projects, and in a week you're heading to Kochi, ya?
Yes.
For
Hello,
performing.
Alia. Hello, Ade. Hello, Hur. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Alia expect me to speak in English. I try my best. So, well, basically, my main practice is as an artist, as a performance artist. But since I'm back to Indonesia after living for such a long time in Germany, I thought I wanted to do something. So I begin to open my studio for public activities that relates with art creations or engaging young people, even like engaging the people in the village, because my studio is in the village in the northern part of Solo. And I was thinking a lot about how to develop uh, practice that are very much connected with the local. So even though my practice, it's also a self-critic to my own practice, because I began my career in Europe, and then I was trying to understand how can I see um, my country, the culture of my country from my root, from my original point of view. Because then I was very insecure how to treat the original, like the local culture, like Indonesian culture, to see the cultural resources as a kind of object, as well as political situation as a kind of object. And then, like I would like to unveil this, and I thought it was not fair for myself to treat all the history and the cultural resources as object. So as an artist, of course, we tend to make a kind of artistic research in making a work. But for me, because of my doubt of the method, of the way of thinking, the way of seeing, using mostly Western influence perspective to see our own country, um, for our political, social, political, and cultural situation, I I tried to find somehow a new kind, or develop a new kind together with other colleagues, with friends, with the local ecosystem in the art, how to see ourselves. So maybe this was the first way I thought to be more, to have something like event like that runs very organic, very simple, and really very humble. I would like to share what I've been doing with my younger colleagues in Indonesia, in Solo, at the Studio Plesungan. So here we have tomorrow we have a performance. So we've been doing a lot of different kind of programs. Like every 2 months, we have on stage, like to encourage a younger choreographer or musicians or composers or performance artists to perform and give them more space, and then also like space for discussion. And also during the pandemic, we did a lot of alternative programs, like also like online programs, online mentorings, and so on and so on. We have different kind of event, like performance art laboratory project. This is to avoid the format of festival where artists come and then perform or show their work. After the opening, they make party and then they left. So performance art laboratory project is to invite practitioners, performance art practitioners from different countries and also from Indonesia, of course, to discuss or to to get to know each other more about the actual practices. So this was always very fruitful and very interesting. And we started already from 2007 until 2000, until recently last year. And then we have undisclosed territory, which is more the performance art event where artists present their works as long durational performance or as short durational performance. So this is it looks like this, the studio, more open platform, open air platform, where people, artists can do. It's like more like a multifunctional space where we can put the roof on the platform. We can put some kind of tent, and then we have all activities there at the open air situation. So it's very basic. It's very close to the environment in the village, and but the quality of the discussions and practices actually is beyond the locality too. But anyway, as an artist, I have two different way because I felt my practice, like my work being put in the museum, in the biennale, and in White Cube, for example, that I think I felt something is missing. But at the other hand, I could not leave my practice that I have been doing over 25 years. So the other side of my practice that relates with the development of the art is also like opening this studio and also like being curators and also mentoring some like empowering programs for female artists, for young artists, and so on. The last maybe as maybe you know that I have been working with Ade too in 2017 for the Jakarta Biennale in Jakarta in 2017, and there I was invited. I was honored to be invited as an artistic director, where we invited also another co-curators. There are Philip Pirota, Pitar Avranek, Indro Wianto, and Anissa Gutom, to shape a thinking that we were thinking about, of course, the subject of decolonialization, but not to use that word. So then we made research and we decided to use jiwa, which is like it's not only the soul but the essence of the soul. So it is an expression of in the art, it's an expression of a practice that of art that relate with the essential how do you say, the essential directions of the artist. So we invite artists whose practice are very not. We try not to see from the perspective of the Western aesthetic, but also those, especially those who are strong actually from their local aesthetic. So we had Made Jirna, we had or our late artists whose work are mostly working on sound and music, and then we also like invite root artists. So in various directions, and collaborate with local institution in Jakarta, like Museum Seni Rupa, the Fine Arts Museum, and Jakarta History Museum. Recently, I work with the government. Maybe this is the last highlight that has consumed a lot of my time. But for me, honestly, I was very careful to work with the government missions. Of course, they have like a highlight missions and agenda. But I thought this is going to be interesting because the subject they offer is to revitalizing or revisiting the cultural heritage as an inspiring resource. One as to understand more it's historically, but also like to re-narrate those resources into a new narrative and and connect to be connected with the digital era. So that's why I think it's an opportunity to work with a lot of young people, young artists. And so we invented some programs that are also we call it pre-event, that are also like connecting young people to through classes and workshops to understand our cultural heritage and develop their imagination, their visions, and to focus on their interest, which is connected or inspired by the cultural heritage, to create a new work, to create a dance film, to create a stage piece that are using technology, to create animations and so on and so on. So Indonesia betul-betul is quite big, and it involves almost 1.5 years of my time, and now we begin again for the next edition, and involve around 900 artists and art practitioners from all over Indonesia. So it is also interesting because then we have somehow a support from the government to focus on our local um, local knowledge, ancient knowledge, and especially now in the era of digital disruption. And so I guess what we need to, because I think Biennale and festival, it's political anyway. Yeah, the history of Biennale and festivals are mostly very political, and artists working politically, when they work, like they make a research and then their work is being put in the white cube, it's a kind of a distance, like putting the relationship between the context and the work that is supposed to be for the public, like in distance. So it's like a displacing the context itself from from the habitus of the subject, and I think to be critical, those kind of spaces, because Biennale becomes like elite again. So like when in the early 2000, like or 2003, like around this early 2000, I visited Venice Biennale. Of course, it's very festive. Yeah, everything is beautiful, installed, good, interesting artists, amazing works, talking about humanity, talking about war, talking about everything. But it is actually displaced from its origin situation. It's very much displaced of the from the reality, or the reality where the artists get inspired. Of course, we need to sound more like, okay, here is the political situation is very tight. Like, let's say Myanmar now, in the beginning, during the COVID, like many performance artists are networked through the digital, through social media to support Myanmar artists, like a couple of years ago. And so every networking, we are doing a spontaneous performance action to support our Myanmar artists, friends or colleagues in Myanmar. It was quite tense because suddenly a lot of artists from all over the world, like sharing videos and supporting, which could be functioning. Yeah. Okay, and so I guess Biennale, it's always very important because it's a non-commercial. I was told when I was young, so to make a career you go first to Biennale and not to commercial gallery. So no, like, so that Biennale should have a different direction than, totally different direction than commercial area, because I think like if we are not as an organizer, as curator, as artistic director, if we are not faithful enough with the spirit of resistance, I think then our political agency should be questioned. So so now I heard like festivals or biennales also like collaborate with commercial galleries where the artists are represented. So this is also like something that is not clear. So if we make a biennale, then maybe like to question again what is our really political agency. How do we engage like public events such as biennale and festival to be like to involve or to engage more society's voices. I think that's from me. Maybe I can share a little bit for with fun what we do. Maybe this one.
Datang. Indonesia, negeri dengan banyak warisan cagar budaya, kekayaan intelektual, dan mahakarya yang luhur tak terkira. Menjadi tugas besar agar terjaga wujudnya dan terwariskan nilainya, tak terlupakan oleh generasi mendatang. Indonesia Bertutur 2022 hadir untuk melestarikan warisan budaya Indonesia sebagai sumber edukasi, sumber pengalaman, dan menjadi sumber inspirasi berdasar hasanah dan pengetahuan tentang 20 situs cagar budaya Nusantara. Pengetahuan dari masa lampau dimaknai dan dinarasikan kembali sesuai konteks masa kini oleh pelaku budaya dan seniman dari dalam dan luar negeri demi menumbuhkan dan menjaga budaya berkelanjutan. Keragaman cara para seniman bertutur akan disampaikan melalui rangkaian karya dan beragam rupa. Datang dan saksikan Indonesia Bertutur 2022 7-11 September di kawasan Percandian Borobudur. Karena dengan mengalami masa lalu, kita mampu menumbuhkan masa depan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mbak Melati, for your
Okay,
sharing. Yeah, thank you very much. I think there are lots of your presentation and explanation somehow connected to what we heard from Ade and Hur, particularly on the connection on locality and the global stage, how you and an artist as organizations, curator, we always want to bring together conversations and listening. I think, again, we would like to emphasize the act of listening from these institutions. And also the last point that you mentioned about how we can translate the political context of specific social political problem into the international states is quite problematic in many ways. Yeah, like you as a curator, you invite artists from one particular local, and then they created work and then being presented in other localities in the global states. I think there is the missing of translation that sometimes happen where people could not really grasp the real situation. So I think we can have some points as the departing point of discussion for the next 30-40 minutes. You can send your questions to the chat room, or you can raise hand, and then we can have more real conversation. I saw already Mita Budiarto here raising hands and open the camera. I think we can start from one question first. So please, Mita.
Halo semuanya, hi everybody. Saya saya punya pertanyaan
I
yang
have questions.
nggak susah sih, cumannya
It's not difficult, but
curiosity saya sendiri.
it's based
Saya
on my
harap dapat respon dari dari moderator dan pembicara. I hope to get some perspective from
saya
everybody.
ingin mendapat perspektif dari Anda semua.
Maybe picking up on the point that Alia was just saying, barusan Alia ngomong tentang the act of listening and how it's becoming even more important when you bring art to the global stage. So I'm trying to connect that. Jadi pengen connect itu sama what happened, the issue of listening and opening yourself up to different points of views. Specifically dengan kasusnya dokumenta terakhir, saya pengen tahu, saya ingin tahu menurut kalian semua, what would be the impact? Because obviously kita semua, well at least I am, and I know, I'm one of many people who feel so proud of what happened with Documenta and are behind what Ruang Rupa are doing fully. We're so proud of what happened and how Ruang Rupa handled it. I wonder now what would happen with the next Documenta, or with Documenta as an institution. Did they listen? Were they willing to listen? Do you think they would be willing to listen and make a difference to how global stages in art, especially ones as prestigious as Documenta? Sorry, aku jadi bahasa Inggris bahasa Indonesia gini. Ya, tapi tahu aja. Saya pengen tahu aja gitu. The act of listening fully, thoroughly, openly, wholeheartedly itu terjadi nggak ya sama Documenta sebagai suatu platform yang begitu prestigious setelah Ruang Rupa datang dan memberikan perspektif. We all saw the slogan, "Thank you Ruang Rupa for letting us see the world in your eyes." Do you think that would make, what kind of impact do you think that would make to Documenta 5 tahun lagi dan seterusnya? Terserah sih yang mau jawab duluan siapa, mungkin adik kali karena yang paling terlibat, karena mungkin adik karena juragan. Tapi saya ngarepin ada jawaban dari semuanya sih.
Halo, thank you Mita. Itu bahasa Indonesia bahasa Inggris? Indonesia aja nggak apa-apa. Indonesia aja. Ada ini bisa beberapa hal sih. Aku agak khawatir kalau menjawab ini. Aku mesti ngecek kontrak aku masih. No. Sebenarnya yang agak sangat terlalu ini juga kita perdebatkan sebenarnya ya. Sebenarnya kan ada beberapa, kalau kita percaya cara mengubah sesuatu gitu ya. Yang pertama kita masuk ke dalam, terus mengubah sistemnya dari dalam gitu dengan resiko kita menjadi virus, terus virusnya juga sebenarnya punya resiko untuk menjangkitkan sesuatu gitu ke badannya gitu. Tapi bisa juga virusnya dibunuh juga bisa. Atau badannya jadi imun. Atau satu lagi bisa jadi parasit gitu, bisa jadi parasit yang terus menempel ke struktur utama gitu. Itu satu hal lagi. Atau tidak berada di sistem itu, tapi tapi mengubah sekelilingnya gitu, yang lalu menjadikan model tertentu itu yang kita anggap bermasalah itu menjadi obsolet. Lalu dia akan mengubah dirinya sendiri atau terus menjadi obsolet. Dan jadi sekitarnya yang kita ubah gitu. Oke, ini misalnya ilustrasi sederhananya adalah waktu kita bikin Good School gitu. Kita juga mempertanyakan, ini kita mau berkolaborasi atau nyoba mengubah model edukasi seni, lalu kita bekerja sama dengan sekolah seni apa enggak ya gitu. Dengan resiko energi dan waktu dan kemungkinan dan ketidakmungkinannya gitu. Tapi juga pilihan yang lainnya adalah apakah kita membiarkan saja gitu sistem itu ada, lalu kita lebih memfokuskan energi dan waktu kita untuk mengolah atau mempercanggih model yang kita percaya ini, untuk menjadi sesuatu yang menjalar, mereplikasi gitu, lalu membuat sistem lama menjadi obsolet. Gitu. Ada dua itu ya aku pikir ya yang bisa diinin. Nah di konteks documenta yang kemarin itu kita masuk di dalam gitu, jadi benturannya memang sangat keras. Tadi pertanyaan Mita itu kalau apakah mengubah, kalau secara lembaga ada hal-hal yang sangat panjang dan sangat politikal juga yang hampir tidak mungkin diubah kalau menurut aku ya. Cuma paling tidak kita berhasil untuk menawarkan itu dan memperlihatkan bagaimana sebenarnya sebuah model bisa bekerja di sebuah sistem seperti itu gitu. Dua-duanya sebenarnya hurt ya, dua-duanya sebenarnya terluka. Kalau menurut saya, dua-duanya sebenarnya terluka. Makanya kita sebenarnya, kalau saya pribadi, saya sebenarnya tidak terlalu peduli dengan berubahnya documenta. Karena kalau menurut saya cuma dengan cara itu kita mendesentralisasi documenta. Salah satunya adalah yang kita lakukan adalah dengan membuat documenta menjadi hanya salah satu dari perjalanan proses panjang lumbung gitu. Yang kita utamakan sebenarnya perjalanan lumbungnya gitu, bukan perjalanan dokumentanya. Dokumenta aku pikir punya konteks sejarah dan punya konteks politik gitu ya. Dan kalau mereka atau sebagai sebuah lembaga ingin atau masih begitu berada di dalam sebuah percakapan, kalau menurut saya memang akan sulit gitu untuk tidak mengubah sesuatu gitu. Dan kemarin kalau menurut saya itu memperlihatkan hal seperti bahwa itulah yang bisa dilakukan gitu oleh sebuah lembaga gitu dalam skala documenta. Pertanyaan itu sebenarnya sulit ya, saya sendiri nggak bisa jawab documenta ke depan seperti apa. Karena di beberapa tahun terakhir memang documenta cukup mendapat intervensi politik dan politikus yang berbeda dari sejarah-sejarah sebelumnya, dan itu menjadi juga, kalau menurut saya juga jadi catatan buat banyak konteks juga ya, bagaimana tadi misalnya Melati bilang dengan tipis-tipis gitu kan, bagaimana bekerja dengan badan pemerintah gitu, yang lalu juga tentu aja punya representasi publik dan dana publik gitu ya. Itu yang jadi pembeda. Jadi banyak sekali diskusi sebenarnya yang bisa terjadi dari dari pengalaman yang kemarin di documenta itu gitu. Karena kalau itu benar-benar sebenarnya kami juga diundang untuk terlibat kembali untuk langsung tidak langsung gitu ya, untuk yang berikutnya gitu. Cuma kita tentu aja punya pikiran bahwa itu hanya akan relevan buat kami kalau itu berhubungan dengan praktek lumbung yang kita sedang kerjakan gitu. Kalau tidak, saya pikir itu akan menjadi sesuatu juga yang tidak masuk akal buat kami gitu. Saya pikir menjadi penting gitu kalau lembaga-lembaga menjadi sangat atau target atau goal membuat lembaga-lembaga berpikir tentang ekosistemnya. Kalau menurut saya itu menjadi hal yang utama di sini gitu, dan sekali lagi kita sudah sering, saya pikir gitu, cukup bingung gitu untuk menentukan kita berada di mana nih dalam konteks perubahan yang tadi gitu. Saya pikir kita harus segera memutuskan gitu, kita berada di sebelah mana gitu, dan melakukan hal seperti apa gitu, karena banyak sistem yang sangat rooted, dan itu sudah cukup atau punya mekanisme yang mengakar dan sangat sulit untuk diubah. Tidak ada cara lain untuk membuatnya menjadi obsolete gitu, karena saya selalu khawatir ketika energinya adalah energi antagonism atau energinya adalah direct atau lateral negasi gitu, itu akan menjadi kita sekali lagi kehilangan waktu dan energi untuk mengembangkan model-model yang sebenarnya kita percayai gitu. Semoga menjawab, Mit, sorry.
Bentar,
Ya,
saya boleh ada pertanyaan lanjutan dikit aja.
2 menit.
Oke. Ade barusan kan lo ngomong herd, gue sebagai I'm a student of affect theory, jadi gue tertarik dengan hal-hal yang sifatnya emo dan baper, dan gue tertarik pas lo ngomong hurt, both sides are hurt gitu kan, both sides merasa terlukai. Itu di konsep lumbung atau praktek lumbung, itu ada nggak sih, itu bisa lo elaborate nggak sih perasaan-perasaan kayak kecewa, hurt gitu-gitu tuh di dalam konsepsi lo tentang lumbung itu, khususnya hurt dan kekecewaan itu ada nggak sih tempatnya di konsepsi lo tentang lumbung? That's it.
Makasih, Mit. Sebenarnya yang kemarin itu sebenarnya lumbung itu kan sebenarnya juga selain collective sharing resources dengan self organized governance gitu, dia juga sebenarnya adalah cara sustainability gitu, secara ekonomi dan juga secara sumber daya, yang salah satunya adalah sebenarnya bagaimana sebuah society atau sebuah masyarakat atau sekelompok orang berpikir tentang sebuah krisis gitu. Jadi lumbung juga sebenarnya soal bagaimana menghadapi krisis. Jadi waktu kemarin itu ketika kontak friksinya terlalu keras, sebenarnya yang sering kita lakukan adalah, dan itu sama sekali tidak terlihat di pameran tentu aja ya, karena prosesnya di antar seniman dan juga dengan ekosistem masing-masing itu adalah melakukan konsolidasi, lalu juga saling mendengarkan, saling mengekspresikan konteksnya masing-masing, saling berusaha mengerti. Lalu yang paling penting yang sebenarnya tadi aku juga udah sebutkan adalah lalu terciptanya solidaritas gitu. Jadi buat banyak teman-teman waktu itu terjadi sebenarnya sangat gembira sebenarnya dengan konstruksi lumbung gitu, karena banyak sekali teman-teman yang juga tentu aja sudah berpengalaman berhadapan dengan event-event seni rupa dan juga krisis-krisis politik gitu. Buat mereka lumbung itu bisa menjadi satu wadah gitu yang bisa jadi konstruksi untuk menahan semuanya untuk nggak pecah atau nggak hancur gitu. Dan bahkan beberapa teman gitu, kami sendiri juga bahkan sebenarnya justru tidak bisa membayangkan apa yang terjadi ketika krisis misalnya sama gitu dan tidak ada lumbung sebagai penopangnya gitu. Jadi kemarin itu solidaritas justru dan jejaring justru semakin kuat, dan bahkan alasan untuk alasan untuk melanjutkan pertemuan-pertemuan jejaring-jejaring ini menjadi lebih kuat gitu. Jejaring ini sebenarnya buat ruang rupa sendiri bukan hal yang baru ya, kita mengalami 2 kali lah gitu ya. Ada Re-Network sama Arts Collaboratory gitu. Tapi kekurangannya kalau saya boleh bilang salah satunya adalah itu cukup performatif dan jadi simulatif gitu. Sementara yang kali ini dengan documenta dan lumbungnya yang kita operasikan itu benar-benar real gitu, berhadapan dengan krisisnya real dan juga cara menghadapinya juga real juga gitu. Dan ini sangat jadi model belajar buat banyak orang yang terlibat di dalamnya sih kalau menurut saya gitu.
Or museums actually connect to this idea of distant solidarity on how you translate of one political context to the other. Because for example, when we bring the works about the conflict in Myanmar and then it's being staged in Europe, for example, the audience, they don't really understand the context, or they don't feel like similarities as we in Asia or in Myanmar facing the problems. Could you give us some response about this issue of the translation of the political context?
Is that question for me? Sorry, Ali. Or
maybe Hur first.
okay.
Did you hear my questions before? Yeah.
I think I heard half of it.
I think do you want me to repeat?
I think you're talking about things being out of context because of the situation and
kind of, and the translations of the context. How do you make the audience or the people somehow could relate more to the issue, even though they are distant from the problems, for example?
Yeah. I think, in a lot of countries, I think we could see it in Documenta. It's full of people from all over the world, Kassel, So I think people do relate to the situation one way or another, no matter where you are. It's just about um, the place and time that could make the situation maybe more accessible. When I mentioned the work of Imran Qureshi being on the rooftop of the Met, for example, it's a different type of project. It's the Met in New York. It's very distant from people. It's in um, a different part of the city that only certain people are visiting. So I think in that situation, it is for sure problematic. Um, but I don't think it's always about location. I mean, about countries, because with migration, people are all over the world. I think Europe, maybe it is a bit of a wake up call to have these conversations in Europe, but not to feel detached or have the narrative written by a certain group of people, but to be able to own the narrative, I think is more important. I don't know if that makes sense.
And maybe you can also comment more on the situation after Documenta before we ask opinion from Mbak Melati.
Yeah, I think, as I said, I'm not, a lot of people are contemplating on what's next with Documenta, but for me, Documenta and Venice, they're such big giants in this biennial conversation. I think for me, it's more important to focus on solidarities with our biennials in the global south. I think for me, those are the questions that are more interesting. And I think what happened with the current Documenta really opened the eyes and brought even more solidarity with all of us. I mean, I wasn't there for the opening. I saw how how amazing it was, and everybody was very happy. And then I went at the end when all the news came out, and I didn't feel that when I was there. I felt support from the local people in Kassel. I felt there was support also from the organizers at Documenta and the people working there. So I think it's really unfair to let certain bad press that's going around in Europe right now and in Germany that's trying to control a lot of the narrative on censorship and freedom of speech to suit them and the double standards. You see it with Ukraine versus Palestine, or every other situation where certain people or certain situations are more important than others. I think that's a situation and that's a conversation that's happening in Europe, in Germany, and it's happening throughout, Documenta or not, it's happening everywhere.
Thank you. Mbak Melati, you can also respond to the question thinking about how this solidarity brought by the situation, the post-Documenta can continue also to inspire and bringing bigger network in the collectives or institutions and artists, art workers in Global South.
For me, I think I have a very humble knowledge about how to maintain the networking of Lumbung and the global south, because then we are now talking about the international focus. But for me, also at the same time, it is very important to connect with the reality here, like those who are having artist collectives or like art communities, cultural communities in, for example, in Indonesia or in the region of Southeast Asia. It's been very tough to be connected between Southeast Asian collectives, even because every collectives have different agenda, and this independent characteristic of the collectives are very various, and they are not always the same in the same direction. and many also like looking after the style of the success model of collectives. And so this kind of movement, of course, is very important to be maintained. And what we can do, what we could do in the, for example, what I could do as artistic director is also to give a little force to the government to involve, for example, the local Indonesian artist collectives in the theater, in the dance, in the performance art, in visual art, in music, to be there, to be active, not to be activated, to be, how do you say, connected, and that we listen to what they are trying to voice out. So this is a very tough process because most of the collectives, they are not registered. Most of the collective, they're against all this even bureaucracy. But in a way, when we approach to discuss and to work with, and so they both sides try to negotiate what could be done together. So this is, for me, I think it was very important um, to support this interaction between among the collectives, and also like to make the dialogue with the government. And like government has a certain complicated bureaucracy, but then it is our agency to say, come on, we are we have to support and let them grow. And it's not about bad things. And look at them, the young people, they want to learn, we need to support, and so something like that. So then they try to understand. And because also like the bureaucracy people also young, so they are actually very close with the reality. but sometimes it's very tough for me to think about the international networking without knowing our own ground. And so like my experience, if I don't have anything in my, like if I don't understand my own practice and what I'm talking about in my artwork, then it is also of course very difficult for me to present my work internationally. So this is it's a lot of negotiation in the process of networking. And I think Lumbung is very, very interesting for sure, especially not only for the global South. It should become a model of the other side, of the high art, the other side of the festive biennale, or even festival. And so that this kind of concept is strengthening, is a one alternative, I would say, one alternative to strengthening um, the networking, to move together, to help each other, to support each other. And whatever, the political agency or cultural agency behind that, of course, we also need not to forget that those happen also sometimes because of generous fundings. So those who do not get funding also probably would have difficulties, and fundings always have agenda. So these are critical point that I think networking should also be critical to where is the origin of the support. What is the agenda, and what is the political agenda of the fundings themselves. So and there are many local collectives who they mention themselves as collective, which has no funding, which are not thinking about getting funding even, but they are still moving on. So this is more, for me, more into my my interest, that those still in between or in the liminal spaces of movement. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mbak Melati and Hur. I think last question for Ade, because I know you have to leave soon. Like from Tintin, see for example, emphasize also what is the connection of lumbung as metaphor with like the program of the government about the food of lumbung that Jokowi was launched in 2017. Do you think in the next project of lumbung you will be somehow connecting to that real idea of lumbung as the like collect in the spirit of collectivity of the food politics?
Ya, kalau secara langsung mungkin nggak ada ya, tapi lumbung memang bahkan banyak masih dan secara praktik memang dikerjakan gitu, bahkan di urban setting, di kota-kota itu juga ada sebenarnya lumbung sebagai sebuah konsep ya, sebagai sebuah konsep pengelolaan collective resources gitu. Dengan nilai-nilainya yang kalau menurut saya menarik tentu aja bagaimana konsep-konsep itu tentu aja banyak ya, kooperasi, bagaimana sebenarnya negara lalu mengambil itu menjadi sebuah model. Saya berasal dari generasi yang selalu mencurigai apa yang dilakukan oleh negara gitu dengan segala macam top down inisiatif. Jadi mungkin catatan untuk itu ya, apakah itu akan dikerjakan dengan niat yang benar-benar berasal dari warga? Kalau menurut saya itu adalah tantangan atau pertanyaan besarnya sebenarnya, bagaimana sebuah kebijakan misalnya itu dikerjakan bagi warganya. Kalau menurut saya problem kita gitu, masyarakat atau negara atau Indonesia ini adalah sebenarnya bagaimana cara-cara itu diterapkan dan relasi antar warga dan juga relasi negara dan warga ya, yang kalau menurut saya itu menjadi faktor penentu sebenarnya bagaimana sebuah model akan bisa bekerja atau tidak, karena sebenarnya banyak sekali inisiatif-inisiatif warga gitu, baik lumbung ataupun bentuk-bentuk kerjasama lainnya gitu, model-model edukasi misalnya, itu banyak sekali sebenarnya, banyak sekali. Dan menyambung ke Mbak Melati tadi, saya setuju banget, itu bahkan secara pribadi saya akan lebih ingin memfokuskan diri ke lumbung di Indonesia gitu ya, tentu aja lumbung yang lebih ke praktek budaya gitu ya. Karena kita udah memulai juga dengan lumbung Indonesia, dan kalau menurut saya itu lebih penting karena cuma dengan menjadi lokal lalu kita bisa berpikir hubungan-hubungan interlokal atau internasional. Karena sebenarnya banyak sekali model-model imajinasi kreatif, bagaimana warga-warga mengimajinasikan organisasi seni, kolektif seni yang selama ini tidak pernah terlihat, dan itu kalau menurut saya penting banget untuk diangkat, saling diperlihatkan, bahkan saling belajar satu sama lain dan dipelajari. Kalau menurut saya negara harusnya bisa melihat itu sebagai sebuah, atau berposisi sebagai fasilitator gitu, bukan sebagai karena banyak sekali juga yang terbunuh atau terreduksi gitu karena pengambilan keputusan atau pengerjaan atau peran-peran yang sangat birokratis gitu.
Yeah, thank you. Next questions we have one from Eka Nggalu from Maumere, Central Indonesia. He questions on the notions of citizenship or community when you somehow shaping or formulating the curatorial idea, or as organizer working on the idea of biennale and engaging with the citizen public, who actually you refer to when you talk about citizen or when you talk about community. Maybe Hur and Mbak Melati can respond to the questions first, and then we go back to Ade.
Sure.
I don't know. I think it's a bit difficult here because we in Indonesia we spoke a lot, like Mbak Melati or Ade before mentioned many times the word warga. So I just translate into citizenship. I don't know if it's the correct context. So maybe Eka also can clarify if it's not the right translations. But I think it's more, how do you imagine who's your public, or how do you engage with citizen, and who is citizen in your context or your practice?
Should I go or?
Yeah, please.
I think warga, what he means is
Yeah.
like society, or no?
Yeah, more like can be community as well. So maybe Eka can clarify if you want to raise hand and clarify to us by yourself. Because I think with warga is in Indonesia we have more like political context, like different between the state and the people. So maybe it's more like people or citizen.
Ya, ya mungkin itu sulit ya padanannya. Tetapi warga yang saya maksud juga mungkin lebih daripada sekedar warga negara legali, tapi memang bagian dari komunitas, bagian dari kampung, bagian dari lokasi di mana satu produksi seni atau satu kegiatan seni itu dibuat. Kadang-kadang tatapan seniman atas warga itu secara tidak langsung membuat ada hierarki di dalamnya, sehingga seolah-olah ada satu kutub seniman, produk budaya di satu sisi dan warga di sisi lain gitu. Apakah warga, bagaimana teman-teman melihat warga? Apakah audiens, apakah pasar, apakah penerima manfaat, apakah yang lain-lainnya gitu. Jadi memang ada banyak layer yang kadang-kadang juga tidak terjelaskan ketika satu kesenian mencoba berusaha jadi kontekstual di lingkungannya.
Yeah. Okay, so it's more like how do you engage with the people in the surrounding, who lives in the surrounding of the institution itself or in the event itself. So when you mentioned that the artwork is engaging with the community, is it about like making the audience or activating or them as consumer, or more like the people who has the same equality with the artist? So how do you position them in the context of this art making or the production of an event?
Aku boleh jawab dulu nggak?
Yeah, please, Mbak.
I think the notion of warga itu I think it's more in the context of the public, yeah. And in different cases and different purposes, there are participatory projects. Normally is invented within a bigger event, to not just to negotiate because of the event or not to negotiate a certain condition, but also more to empower. So a good, from my point of view, an interesting big event or whatever, international, national, local, they can give they should give a portion or even priority to think about the involvement of the public engagement, empowering programs, participatory programs, not participative but participatory. That means the idea is coming from, but it's more bottom up rather than top down. So even my experience, I was also very surprised because the culture ministry, they have this scheme of program that should involve or like activating warga, activating the public, the local public. I think it's because Indonesia is so complex. We still also have like the masyarakat adat, yeah, very strong ones. So the I don't want to say indigenous, but it's more about the local culture community who are still very strong uh, related, or they are still practicing, especially in spread in many islands in Indonesia. So these are always been in danger as an object of observation only, or as object of presentations, but never really. They're very rare, like to give attention to the how they maintain their sustainable living in terms of their cultural um, life. So in this kind of event, how far are we distance from reality? We think about the digital world, the digital era, but at the other side, we are still very close with traditional culture. And then for me, it's very important, like to how to see what is in between, what is the history in between, and then we listen. Okay, this is not just preserving culture, but this is like to empower them to sustain. And for me, this in many kind of form, in many kind of formats, like it's not just about art. It's about how, for example, lumbung is really functioning in a traditional community. For example, not just an idea of a lumbung, but also really like lumbung. Like let's do a contemporary lumbung, but in real that is functioning. So if we talk about involvement or engagement with the society, we need to think about um, how art contributes or how art can be functioning to maintain the whole ecosystem. And I think it's a big homework for us, but as an artist, I try from different directions and to learn more and more, and which I think is always a never ending resource. So all the societies levels, or uh, various or diversity of the culture becoming very huge research, and that's why I think it's always very interesting to work and make event or biennale, and especially what is after that. How can we sustain together? I think it's very important, because art consuming is always there. It's been there, a different way of art consuming, but what is the function of that? I think that's my questions. Itu
Yeah, thank you. I think then from Ade, because Mbak Melati discuss about Indonesia, I think maybe you can respond and then we go to Hur. I think also you can somehow give the kind of like closing statement each of you. Jadi I think Mbak Melati talking also about how the idea of lumbung not only as utopia, yeah, but can it be something practical in a way that solving our communal problems? But first also about Eka's question on the idea of warga.
Ya, memang itu pertanyaan yang selalu relevan, Eka, terima kasih. Cuma sekali lagi, kalau menurut saya itu pertanyaan yang tercipta karena selama ini itu menandakan sebenarnya bahwa kita memang terputus dari hubungan seni dan hidup masyarakat dan praktek kesenian atau seniman gitu. Makanya lalu ada pertanyaan bagaimana kita, karena itu pertanyaan Eka adalah pertanyaan berjarak kalau menurut saya atau berasal dari sudah terjadinya keberjarakan gitu. Wah, ribet banget. sudah terjadinya jarak gitu. Dan memang ya itu bukan pada event sebenarnya, tapi itu lebih jauh lagi bagaimana kita melihat kesenian gitu, bagaimana pendidikan menjadikan seniman-senimannya, bagaimana pendidikan dan lembaga-lembaga seni memposisikan praktek-praktek kesenian tidak cuma di ekosistem, tapi juga bagaimana menempatkan warga sebagai entitas yang berjarak. Tapi kalau menurut saya itu sebenarnya berasal dari bagaimana sebenarnya seni sama kehidupan itu sudah terpisah gitu, dan lembaga pendidikan salah satu, kalau menurut saya salah satu agen yang cukup punya potensi dan sangat besar berkontribusi pada kerenggangan atau keberjarakan itu gitu ya. Lalu itu setelah itu ada lembaga-lembaga lain, bahkan pasar atau art market dan segala macam. Jadi saya mungkin dan ya kalau mau merespon lagi Eka, saya pikir mungkin pertanyaannya justru saya malah lebih tertarik pada pertanyaan itu kalau dibalik ya. Bagaimana kita gitu, karena itu realitas kita gitu, bahwa itu sudah berjarak gitu. Kita bersekolah dan segala macam dan berpraktek selama ini dengan cara seperti itu. Pertanyaannya mungkin bagaimana kita yang harus menjadi bagian dari warga gitu, bagaimana menjadi bagian dari warga gitu. Mungkin pertanyaan yang menantangnya itu gitu, bagaimana kesenian dikembalikan lagi, bagaimana lembaga seni menjadi bagian dari warga lagi, bagaimana seniman menjadi bagian dari warga lagi. Dan kalau boleh nutup ya mungkin gitu yang kita kerjakan dengan lumbung ini adalah menjadi salah satu model yang bisa kita coba gitu, karena itu berasal dari sebuah praktek keseharian, kebudayaan yang berhubungan juga dengan relasi-relasi manusia, alam, dan sumber daya ya, bukan hanya sebuah produksi kreatif, tapi lebih luas lagi bagaimana hubungan-hubungan dengan elemen-elemen di alam ini gitu. Saya pikir itu aja. Thank you.
Ya, terima kasih. Ya, so I think from Ade's and Melati's answers, which is more like based on the context of Indonesia, which is quite complicated and lots of layers. For example, Melati talk about the existence of, we call it here masyarakat adat, sometimes we translate into indigenous community, but it's not a real situation as well, it's not the right translation.
Yeah, it's totally different.
Yeah, totally different thing. So I think it's quite interesting how recently artists also working with the community that is maybe outside the urban area, and then they're going to some islands working with the masyarakat adat and create something. So there is also this tensions of who is actually this community being positions politically or in the art context. So maybe in Sarja you have different contexts and different experience on how you create the space for the community engagement, and like how do you see them, the citizen or the public or society, who are they are consumer or they are part of the process of the art marking, or they are the subject or whatever it is. And Ade in the last answer also mentioning that instead of us thinking about bringing the public into the event, it's more us as organizer going into the public to be part of the life. So I think that could be also leading to your closing statement.
Yeah, I think I can give a few examples, you know, like Camp working with the sailors on the dock to do their project 1 year, and then continuing the work with them when we exhibited in Sharjah Biennial 11, 2013. a lot of the community came and watched the film exactly on the other side of where they docked the ship. So that was really important in connecting with that community of sailors that dock their ship right here. We've had Apichatpong work with one of the construction workers who worked on our building, also for that same biennial, and we saw a huge number of his fellow workers and friends come to see Dilbar because he became a famous star. Another thing we do is we try to do things in different languages. We can't translate every language, so we have English, Arabic on our labels, but we've done audio guides in a few other languages like Urdu, Hindi. At the moment, we have the Perform Sharjah, which is a new performance festival we're running, and there is a sonic work, and we've decided to do English, Arabic, Malayalam, and Urdu. And even though a lot of everybody speaks either English or Arabic, for them, knowing that you've thought about their language is really important, and it's about being inclusive. I remember one moment, someone talking about how many Emiratis come to this and that. I said, you know, our audience is the public. It's difficult to go around and find out who's from where or what's happening. And it's not about how you dress, and it's not about if you have the papers, but it's if you're, like you were saying, Alia, if you're living in the vicinity, then you are part of that community. So it's in many layers. It's through collaborations with artists, it's through doing things in the public space, doing things in different languages, doing things, as you know, in different communities that are outside the city center, like you'll see in the upcoming biennial, and you saw a little bit, I think, in the previous biennials as well. So I think it's an ongoing effort. A lot of the projects we do, as well as the building renovation projects, the urban garden project, we do those with surveys around people in the neighborhood. I think it's important to know who is in your surrounding area, and they become, you know, your audience. I don't know if you could hear earlier, I have there are children that play outside my office, and they go and visit our exhibitions because it's right there. And I think those are the different layers of how you can engage with different communities around you. And then artists from, for example, we have this big, this exhibition right now on Pop South Asia that we've curated by Iftikhar Dadi and Rubina from Kiran Nadar Museum. And it's a collaboration with Kiran Nadar. And it's been a really big, a really important exhibition here, looking at artists' work from across South Asia and their relationship to popular culture. That's another way of engaging with local communities from different cultures by showing artists and artwork from their hometown.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. I think we can have virtual applause to all the speakers today, and thank you very much for all the attendees. We have many familiar names here, and I think there are many points of discussions that can be the departure statement for tomorrow, because we still have the symposium tomorrow with different speakers. But I think there are some urgent issues that came up from our discussions today, that most of the time we think about the connections between local and global, which is quite common in our discussions about Biennale. It's always being questions and criticized on how the international biennales, in many cases, somehow trying to be part of the international conversations, but kind of like distance, if we use the term that coined by Ade when responding to Eka's questions, for example, how the Biennale somehow being seen as a distant space for the local situations. But I guess in the last decades, we saw many of different form of Biennales or curatorial practices that somehow trying to break the boundaries between the artists, the communities, and how bringing more the audience and public to be part of the discourse itself. So not the audience or the public as the object or the object of the questions, but they're as the active part and the agency for their own situations. And the art making usually we facilitate, we become the playground of different issues. I think that's all for today. Thank you very much. Thank you for all the technical teams that helping us here. Also in the office, applause for everyone. And we still have one day tomorrow, but we will start later. It will be starting 15, so it's +7 GMT. 3 p.m. Indonesian time. It will be around 9 in Europe, I guess. And I hope that you will be joining us for tomorrow. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mbak Melati. Thank you, Ade. Thank you, Hur. And I hope to see you soon somewhere. Bye, and good luck for all the projects and the preparations for Sarjah.
Thank you, Hur. Thank you, Mbak Mel.
Dah.
Bye, thank you. Terima kasih, Ade.